Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to my session. My name is Kemal Zaki. I'm from Indonesia, Bandung Institute of Technology or School of Business and Management, and also from RAND School of Business or RANS France. And in today Kuala Lumpur International Conference on Management and Business Practices, 4th of December, I would like to bring out the topic of the correlation of a country's supply chain performance through logistic performance on a country's economic condition. And this will be a comparative analysis between the developing and developed countries. And before I start, I would like to say a few words of acknowledgement to two of my supervisors, Mr. Olajide Festus Awokoya and Mrs. Anissa Noventias, from both France and Bandung, respectively, who taught and helped me to complete dissertation, and obviously to my family and friends that closely supported me throughout this dissertation, and to Eurasia for this amazing opportunity to present my work in an international scope. So let's start with the background. So in history, it was always proven that the development of countries' supply chain management system through their respective logistics sector have a positive impact on their economic condition, and operational costs that a country's incur to trading activities could be reduced by a significant margin if there is a profounding system accompanied by solid infrastructure such as services, equipment, prepaid technologies, system information, and this would attract investment to develop those needs for international trade. And the access to a better system and infrastructure would also impact that country's performance in doing international trade comparatively, and such would not only impact cost-related metrics, but also impact other side effects indirectly. And those direct causality will summarize in an increase in trading volumes or activities will augment the need for better infrastructures and system, which then would trigger further investment opportunities to augment those infrastructures and system. And this direct relationship between trading activities and logistics sector could imply a need of strategic change in policy implementation, as it could trigger the multiplier effect and increase a country's economic condition. So in short, an increase in the digital sector increase the international trade as well, and which then leads to an increased economic condition. So all those two factors correlate to each other, and if one improves, the other will also improve. It's proven like that in past researchers. And what is the problem statement? Because all of that seems well. So I need to know how much different it is between the developed countries and developing countries. Because to reach those advancement and investment, you need money, and only developed countries have that source of resources to perform that. And this research will enter a different point of view on this matter and do a comparative analysis between those two countries' classification to see the difference in the correlation of the improvement of the logistics sector and their economic growth. And such three research questions have been included. The first one is, does supply chain performance through logistics sector have any correlating impact towards economic growth for both classification, developing and developed, and how significant are those impacts for developed and developing countries, and how different is the significance of impact between those two? And the research objective is, for the first question, is to understand, is there even a correlation, just as past studies mentioned, between logistic performance indicator and economic growth in both classification. Second, this research objective is to compare analytically whether the logistic performances impact economic growth the same way for both classification, and if there's a difference, I want to see the difference. So that's the last objective, to comparatively compare those two statistically. And such, this is the foundation, the theoretical foundation that I've used. The first one is supply chain performance management measurement. And by performance measurement, it was defined an effort to quantify the efficiency and effectiveness of a performance in the form of measure indicators or metrics to the extent of which it show whether the desired goals such as cost are delivered, in which this is the common metrics or goal to be measured in the supply chains sector, or even the quality of product manufactured. So it was suggested to use logistic metrics to assess supply chains performances, because by assessing the logistic metrics, you can measure facility use, the inventory, how they transport their products, and that will measure performance in the supply chains. And logistic metrics also correlates positively to international trade, as what I stated earlier. In fact, the activities of international trade have become an important part of gross domestic products. Again, an increase of logistic and results in an increase in international trade, which then also leads to an increase of a country's economical condition. This also works vice versa. So whatever it is that increase first, the other two will also increase. And now this is the logistic and economic growth in developed and developing countries. So several studies that I've noted. The first one is Mauritius. This research was set from 1950 to 2000. And it was found that infrastructure of transportation have an important correlation with economic growth. So again, infrastructure of transportation, logistics sector. And then Korea Republic, developed countries from 2000 and 2013, and China then was a developing country still from 2003 to 2010, found that in both short and long run, economic growth and logistic output have causal effect, and mainly land infrastructure on, in this case, a logistical input for transportation. And this put a great emphasis on private firms or even country themselves to put their focus on the increase of infrastructure to again increase their logistics sector performances. And this is the indicator variables that I will be using for the data sample. So the first one is LPI, or Logistic Performance Indicator. So it's an online assessment tool. It's common for benchmarking purposes, and it's already been used multiple times in past researches to research logistic performance of a country. So this is the best indicator or variables that can be used to assess a country's performance logistically. And the Penwell table, I use this to get a sense of each country economic condition. And what makes it the Penwell table different is because they adjusted so that the comparative view on equal terms to be done. Because in other sources, they still use each country respective income level. So an even comparison cannot be created by using other resources. But Penwell table adjusted that first, so now an even comparison could be done. So this is the design workflow that I've used. I've explained how did I identify the problems, how did I find the objective, what theoretical foundation I use, and now from classifying countries to the conclusion, I will explain later on. So this is the country classification transform that I've used. I've decided to go with the Atlas method from the World Bank that divides into 4 categories, and then from the high income, in which means the countries has reached maturity economically, so which they are developed. And for the upper, lower, and lower, they are still considered as developing. And the data sample that I've used from the LPI is data from 2007 to 2018. So I cut off every data over 2018 because the Penwell table only consists of data until 2019. And the LPI only conclude data biannually, so from 2018 to 2020. But the Penwell table at that time was only consists data from 2019. So prior to 2007 and after 2018, I cut off the data. And this is the model from hypothesis. Now there's no correlation between economic growth and supply chain performance, and the alternative hypothesis, there is a direct correlation. And this is the model that I've used. Economic growth equals function logistic performance input Z and land log. So this is the variable definition. So the variables from overall input and output. This is the definition. So in overall, it average all 6 of the subcategories from tracking, quality of logistic, ease of shipment, custom clearance, and timeliness. From the input, I only put infrastructure to measure a country's logistic input, and from the logistic output of a country, I put timeliness. In a way, is a measured amount of times the right products reach the designated recipients. And this is the other variables, EGR or economic growth, GDPT -1 or lack GDP per capita of a previous year as the capability to invest of a country. LGR, labor growth, and human capital, the quality of those labor force. And this is the dummy variables, border lengths and landlocked, to make it more even in the research. And this is how I get those variables, especially the EGR. So like GDP per capita, I got from GDP per capita divided by population, and then from those two real GDP, I subtract the last one, so I could see the difference in real GDP per capita. And then I got the economical growth. And this is how I got the capability to invest, and the lag GDP, and also the labor growth. And this is the four methods that I've used. First of all, child test, Hausman test, and Bruch and Pagan, Lagrangian test, multiplier test. All those three of those are used to determine whether a fixed model effect could be used or not. And each of them have their own separate function. And the fixed effect is to omit variables that vary and eradicate error in the data panel to reach a more conclusive conclusion. And this is the result of the classification. So developed countries from Australia to Uruguay, they all reach a certain threshold to be called the developed countries. And this is developing countries. All countries that are still a higher income countries to even a lower income countries, all of them are still considered developing according to the World Bank. So there's a huge discrepancy between inside the developing countries classification. And this is the summary of the economic variables. So inside the parent thesis, we can see a standard deviation, mean, number of observation, the minimum value, and also the maximum value. As you can see that in the developing countries, the discrepancy is quite wide, and so is the developed countries, because developed countries have a minimum threshold, but they don't have a maximum threshold, so they can keep on improving and improving and improving, and that's what makes the discrepancy so large. And now is the logistic variables summary. Again, the parentheses are all the same. This is the summary for all the three logistic variables, and this is the result. So first of all, the child test, the F critical value are 0 or below the significant level of 0.05. Then fixed effect will be adopted. Hausman test, the chi-square value is 0.0003 and 0. So again, below significant level of 0.05, fixed effect will be adopted. And the Lagrangian test, chi-bar 2 values are 0.03 each. So means the fixed effect will also then be used. And this is the fixed effect result for the developed countries. Surprisingly, only the labor growth and capability to invest have a statistically significant effect to economical growth because their value is 0.0001, which is below 0.05 significant levels. And all the logistic variables and the human capital variables are all above the significant level of 0.05. So which means they're still affecting something, but they're not significantly correlated. And overall, all of these variables only contribute to 12.5% to economical growth. So there's still like 87.5% other variables not mentioned in this research that could actually be more relevant to use in this research. And this is for the developing countries. It's all the same. Only the labor growth and investment correlates directly and statistically significant. And all of them combined are just valued, only contribute in the value of 26%, which means there are under 73% of variables not mentioned that are maybe cumulatively more relevant to use. And such from the discussion and conclusion, is that from the F statistic, it could be seen that in both cases of developed and developing countries, all the variables combined do have an impact on economic growth. Yet for developed countries, all of them only contribute to 12, as I've said, and for developing only contribute to 26. So in a way, all of those variables contribute more if that country is still developing. So surprisingly, amidst the problem statement that I've stated earlier, in which only developed country could tap that potential of an investment and advancement of logistics sector to increase their international trade, to increase their economical condition, because they have the resources to, but probably because so that they cannot keep replying the same increasing of impacts because of how high the level of maturity in terms of their economical status for developed countries. So for developing countries, the opposite happens. So the one time you improve the logical sector, it also improves more in terms of their economical growth. So this shows that while logistic performance are proven to not have that significant impact in developing countries, it still contributed more to their own growth in economic condition. And this is the limitation of this research. Upon completing, I understand that there may be the data sample was too small and it would need to be increased. And the variables are proven to be small as well and only contributes little to the dependent variables. So other variables could be deemed more relevant in the future. And lastly, the methodology used will limit it as well, as knowledge barriers and the sufficient number of variables happens to limit the methodology available for the data panel. So for recommendation, even though a conclusive conclusion was reached in answering those two research questions above, in my yes, they all have impact, but not statistically significant. And for developed countries is 12%, for developing countries is 26%. In such developing countries, their improvement of logistics sector correlates better to their economic condition. But for future researchers, there's still a room of improvement in such. There are more methodology to be explored that could allow a more comprehensive comparative analysis in those two classifications, and even a use of a new variables to instigate better in terms of how logistic performance affects economic condition. And lastly, maybe the classification was too rigid. So other than by using economic maturity, we can classify them by region perhaps. And I think that's all. If there are future inquiries regarding the data or references, kindly contact my email. And thank you very much for listening.